What's up, everybody? Being the first episode, I just wanted to log in a little early, do some sound levels. Once I see how everything's going, I'll get started. The lag is especially long on Facebook, apparently. Okay. I think we're almost ready. All right, so that's not too bad. That's doable. I can live with that. Okay. Groovy. What's up, y'all? Mike MANSER. Welcome to my second live stream this week through Facebook and YouTube. You can see yesterday's at both of those places. Today, I'm here to talk to you about records. This is going to be a recurring segment called MANSER's Vinyl Fallout. And, I just want to come in here and talk about records that I think are interesting, that I own, maybe go into discographies and little, genre overviews and stuff like that, We'll see what goes on. So, yeah, if you're watching this live, just type something up in the comments, get involved in the chat, do whatever, and, share it, get people to know about it, like it, whatever you got to do. I'm a little wobbly today because my internet's being fucking bullshit. I'm just going to cut to the chase. It's this thing of it never works like I need it to. Nothing ever works together. It's always got to be doing its own fucking thing. And a lot of it I can't even control. It just gets overwhelming. It's draining and but, it's what I do. It's all I got to do a lot of times. And, that's why I got into this streaming. And you know what? It's it feels good to come in here and talk about stuff that I actually know something about and enjoy talking about. So, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to forget about all the fucking stressful shit that this technology, forces on me, and I want to come in here and talk about records. It's I always talk about music and, I tell people all the time, oh, you gotta listen to this, you gotta listen to this. I make all these recommendations, but it's I never have an audience, it's always maybe somebody will see it somewhere and it's that's fine. But it's I like to talk too. I like to have people hear my voice. I had the podcast, Night Cult, which this will be part of that podcast as soon as I rip the audio. So, that's something to look forward to. And yeah. So, no time like the present. Let's get started on this episode. So, what I'm going to do is each episode, however often I do this, I'm going to show what I've been picking up in the last week or so since the last episode. Seeing that this is the first episode, I'm going to go through what I've bought the last month as far as records. And then after I finish with those, I will move on to the main topic. which is just, some general records that, not a lot of people probably know about or talk about. I definitely don't hear as much about them, but I feel like, that there's a lot to be said. There's a lot of, great stuff that, not every day do you come across. And, sometimes you got to have somebody tell you about it. So that's what I came here to do today. So let's get into some new scores that I've been getting the last month. This is mostly, I'd say a lot of this is Red Scroll. Couple of, it's pretty much all Red Scroll. Shout out Red Scroll Records, Wallingford, Connecticut. And yeah, I just get, constant gold from there. So, shout out to them. Go give them all your money. So yeah, first record I wanted to start off with is get the waiting on this. Crown of Thorns, Trainyard Blues, 1995. This is an original. It's on black vinyl, so I'm not going to bother with showing you the actual wax on that one. But I feel like Crown of Thorns, a lot of people talk about now. There's a lot more representation of them and stuff. But back in the day, not a lot of people were repping that band hardcore, unless you were in New York or around that kind of scene and stuff. I hear a lot of people back then talk about stuff like Scarhead and other, Lord Ezak, Danny Diablo related projects. But it's very rare that I heard about Crown of Thorns. And that's a shame, because that's some really great, top tier New York hardcore. There's some great anthems, the fucking vibe of the whole record is amazing. The samples about graffiti. It just really puts you into that train, riding the train, seeing all the graffiti, trying not to get jumped by people in whatever part of New York you're in and stuff. It's very, it's very atmospheric for a 90s hardcore record, but it's great. There's some amazing tracks on here, and just the guitar playing, this kind of metallic, almost like death metal at times. A lot of this might even have influenced a lot of the stuff today. Mind Force, Age of Apocalypse. As far as the guitar sound of a lot of those bands, on the more metallic side, the crossover kind of stuff. Even Power Trip probably picked up some riffage inspiration from this. I just feel like there's a lot of talk about a lot of the other bands involved in that time period. Crown of Thorns, they had a big breakout with that New York hardcore movie. And, every bunch of years, somebody starts, trading that thing around again. It's a bunch of kids getting into, No Redeeming Social Value, District 9, 108. Even though 108, I don't really feel like that's their best point to get into 108. It's just, I don't know. I feel like their other later material is more representative of what they became as a band. Same with Vision of Disorder. That early Vision of Disorder stuff is great, but I don't feel like it's very indicative of what they would become later on with later albums. But yeah, out of all those though, I've always had a love for Crown of Thorns. And it's it's a great underrated, if you love Scarhead or Danny Diablo or any of that kind of stuff, you'll dig it. If you love New York hardcore with a little bit of a weirdness, it's got a little bit of Leeway and Marauder, Killing Time, a little bit of hip hop vibe in it at times. Around the same time that Madball was breaking out, and a lot of that more you know, thug, I guess, even though it's a stupid term for it. Kind of hardcore. Especially out of New York was, at its peak, Biohazard maybe and stuff. So, but out of a lot of that stuff, this record is pretty high up on my list. So yeah, Crown of Thorns, if you can get it. I know it was like almost $40 at a Red Scroll, and trust me, I'm not saying that to brag, but yeah, if you could come across a copy, they're not easy to come across. I've been looking for that one for a while, but if you can, check it out, and if you got it on Spotify, listen to it and see what you like about it, see what you feel about it. Yeah. So, all right, next up, I got a record that's definitely like not for everybody. Not for most people, probably. And I love like harsh noise, power electronics, and all that kind of stuff. And as far as like getting it on vinyl, it's a very good thing to get into. When you're like me, you love DJing, you love like what you can do with the sounds, other than just listen to them. I still listen to these records, don't get me wrong, but a lot of times, lately at least, I've been just like, making tapes and all that good stuff. So, but anyway, since starting all that, I've been getting more into getting, harsh noise and more ambient and just more textural kind of stuff that I can play in the background, different shit. And, I always love White House. I was on this like big White House kick for a while. I don't have any of this stuff on vinyl. That's not really something I have, any access to easily, being in the States. But Pete Best from White House, he has his other band with his wife and some other people. I should have done more research before this, but anyway, this is Consumer Electronics, Airless Space, and don't mind the price tag and the back. And it's a double record, both on black. They got the nice printed sleeves. And Consumer Electronics is, if you dig White House, you can really get into that kind of stuff as well. It's got similar vibes. I feel like I was saying this the other day. It's like, Consumer Electronics is actually kind of a bit like hornier in a more like conventional sense. It's still traumatic and like brutal and overbearing and stuff, but it's just a lot more like open about wanting to fuck than like White House's stuff, which is more shaming you for that kind of mentality. So yeah, it's one of their newer records. I feel like it's like 2019. It's what you would expect from the people involved. It's very, just harsh. The vocals are, very overwhelming, and it's that classic thing I love about White House's material, where it's just this like crazy fucking British guy like fucking yelling the most like hateful shit at you, just like overwhelmingly. And it's not for everybody. Like I said, it's definitely this like fringe thing, but that's what I'm attracted to. I'm attracted to the stuff that not everybody's gonna vibe with, and you can't throw on all the time. It's like the old joke of you don't want to put on a anal cunt while you're being intimate with your significant other. You don't want to do that unless you're they are also into that. But it's not an every moment record. I have a lot of records. I have everything for different moods. You can't spin something constantly. Even though I tend to, even with the really weird ones, much to my neighbor's dismay. But it's what it is. So, next up, get into some Japanese hardcore, some classic stuff from the 80s. Relapse has been doing a lot of great reissues of classic Japanese hardcore stuff. They did the Detestation by Gizm repress, I want to say in 2020, and that thing's everywhere. And that's pretty cool, man, because I remember it was hard to get that record anywhere but like some cheap fan club pressing. I have a really good fan club pressing. It's on white vinyl, but it's like a lot of those things are, kind of thrown together in somebody's basement. A lot of times you have like the fucking numbers burnt off of it. Don't trace us kind of shit. But it's the thing you got to do sometimes if you want that specific record. So I can't bash it too much. But Relapse, putting this stuff out, you can get it at any store. It seems like it's pretty readily available. It's really cool. I got it on Spotify, which, goes against everything that you would think the average Gizm fan would be down with. But, it's what it is, man. And, more people hear it. It's like that's one of those bands I tell people about. And they're like, well, that sounds cool and all, but like, what's the music like? And, with this record being up, it's definitely their most like accessible record. It's definitely the most like mainstream, if you want to call it that, kind of record that Gizm would ever do. But at the same time, I could see, people not being as vibed with it if they had to like dig for. I don't know. It's time and place and stuff, but it's good to have it out there. Everybody can get a good sounding pressing of it on vinyl. They always go all out with the Relapse stuff. So after they came out with that Gizm record, I guess they were seeing that it was very successful. They released another band from that era who's I feel like they've had a couple of discography records through other labels. Again, varying qualities. I don't have the one that came out. I believe it was like Fuck Off and Die Records or something, but I haven't gotten that one yet. So this is the only copy of this I have. And this is a band that's like, a lot of people in the Japanese hardcore, they'll know Gizm, Gauze, stuff like that. But I feel like this is one of those bands, due to the availability of their, stuff, they kind of fall into that, like almost B level kind of status in the Japanese hardcore scene. But I really think they stand up with like stuff like Confuse and Kuro and Gizm and Lip Cream, all the shit that everybody's like gaga over in Japanese circles from the 80s. But yeah, this band I don't feel like got a lot of respect. But this coming out again, Relapse is putting it out, so it's gonna pretty much be everywhere. That's Agony Remains. I believe it's a partial discography or something of the band Zuo. These guys are really cool. They have that classic flexi of I don't remember the name of the flexi, but it had the song Sons of Satan. Just they were almost like a little of a line between the noisier kind of stuff coming out of like Guy, Confuse, Tranquilizer, but they were also mixing it with the kind of over the top theatrics and the military kind of feel and anarcho violent kind of feel of bands like Gizm and that sort of thing. So yeah, they're definitely like noisier, and that's why I kind of like them a lot, because like they definitely do pull that like kind of, you know, confuse kind of, you know, wall of sound, but they have really good riffs. It almost feels a little bit like the Japanese Ghoul at times as well. It's just very epic, and you know, just the thing about Japanese like hardcore, and you know, a lot of Japanese music in general, they're just like ridiculously good musicians. Um, and just as a bonus, I don't want to own a copy of this, but if you really want to hear some great underrated shit, you know, people in my circles will know about it. But if you want to hear some shit that, you know, is a little under the radar, check out Rug, which is Randy Uchida from Gizm, probably around the same time of Gizm's second album, known as Man, which is my personal favorite, which is a more kind of power metal maiden riffage kind of evolution from what they were doing on Detestation. It's just like riffs are amazing. It's got these long kind of ambient industrial passages made by Sakevi. So if ever that one's released, definitely I'm getting like 2 copies. You know, I don't give a fuck. That album's amazing. So yeah, check out Randy Uchida Group if you could find it. Probably go on YouTube, and it's called Deathly Fighter. And holy shit, man, that's some addictive like power hardcore metal stuff. You know, it's great. It's amazing. And rest in peace, Randy Uchida. Okay. Moving on to some black metal. Okay, so if you know me, you know, I've been on a black metal obsession the past few years, buying a lot of shit, you know, all over the place, you know, German stuff and Brazilian stuff and Colombian and Portuguese, Japanese. I love it all, man. And, you know, it's like right now, if you want like this great, like, you know, worldwide kind of scene, you know, you got hardcore, you got grindcore, you got all these things that have always been more worldwide, but it's like most interesting stuff is coming out of these like kind of places you would never expect. And, you know, the last few years, my obsession has been Portugal and a lot of the stuff coming out of Bosnia. So, yeah, it's just really cool because they're from, you know, my geography knowledge, you know, they're different parts of the world, you know, culturally, I'd imagine from each other, you know, geographically, obviously. And it's just the thing of it. They have a very similar mindset. You know, they have the same kind of noisy, meditative kind of feel to some of these bands. I feel like the Bosnian stuff is a lot more like isolated. It's a lot more just like that stereotypical guy in a cave yelling into like, you know, just nothing kind of feel you get from the classic, you know, 90s stuff, or even, you know, stuff like Root, Sarcophago, maybe even Beharit's more lo-fi kind of stuff. So, yeah, you know, a lot of this stuff is being put out by Black Gangrene Productions. So if you get the chance, check out their stuff. You know, it's pretty much available through all the big places, Nuclear War Now, Hell's Headbangers. You know, they always have a bunch of copies of Black Gangrene stuff, and they do pretty good. It's not like Go to War X, where if you miss out on something, it will take you forever to find another copy of it. They're usually pretty, you know, good with their pressings and stuff. You know, some of them are a little cheap, This one is not actually on the Black Gangrene Productions. This is on Altair, which I believe is also Portuguese, but I might be wrong. I know Signal Rex is down there as well. And just as a side, again, I know I take a lot of these, but Signal Rex, great t-shirt selection if you're into this kind of shit. So, check them out, and you'll find some cool shit. So, anyway, Manser, what's the fucking record, man? Why you fucking jerking me off? All right, so this is Void Prayer, Relics of the Storm. That's the back. Little, I usually don't really fuck with these kind of. I feel like Altair in particular has a fetish for these kind of covers. I'm not big on it. It's what it is. I could get into a rant about that another time. But more importantly, just Void Prayer. I've been into them for a minute. They start off probably 2014 is when they turned from Cave Ritual to Void Prayer. Cave Ritual is a lot more of that, kind of ambient cave dweller kind of music. Relics of the Storm, as far as, Void Prayer's discography, is probably the most they've gone into that kind of territory, but the other two records last year, standing out the most, the Grandiose Return to the Void. They have a really good split with Nefarious Spirit. I feel like they're from Spain. That's out on Go to War X. It's going to be a while till I can find a copy of that I can afford at this point. But that one last year was a really big record. It's just amazing because their record before that, I can't remember the title of, but it came out, I want to say like 2017, 2018. So that was coming out around the same time that Obscuritatum and Cephalic Night, all these other Bosnian acts were starting to become more well known. Vitek, how do I say that? Their record last year was really good. Obscuritatum's constantly putting out good shit, and it's like, I found Void Prayer because its drummer is Obscuritatum, and I believe he does vocals too. The thing with a lot of these bands is they're all mysterious kind of stuff. I feel like Obscuritatum's page doesn't even have a fucking members list. It's just this supposedly one guy, but I don't know. And it's not as cryptic with Void Prayer. They aren't really. They're all like credited with like a letter. So it's A on bass, E on guitar, H on guitar, and O on guitar. So it's like they're kind of on drums. I mean, O is which is probably Obscuritatum, but I don't know. But a lot of these guys share members. They share members with a couple of other bands within the Bosnian scene. And this record was released probably 2020 as well. Yeah, I'm pretty sure end of 2020. Probably around the same time they recorded the Grandiose Return to the Void, because this feels like it was part of the same session, because it's a lot of the same sound. It's a lot more atmospheric and ambient. If I could compare it to anything, it's another record from last year called that was a split between Candelabrum and Sulfuric Night. Sulfuric Night is another, I can't say that word, but it's another band out of the Bosnian scene. I'm pretty sure it's another band that Obscuritatum plays drums for. And they're just straight ahead, fast, cultish, kind of raw black metal. your average stuff. And so this one was originally just on CD. It was a CD single, 15-minute long CD, one song. And at the beginning of the year or whenever, they repressed it along with some other obscure Tatum stuff. But I believe that was put out by Black Gangrene Productions. So, but this one, it's a 15-minute long piece, very, kind of freestyle as far as their kind of stuff. There's not really much of a structure compared to other Void Prayer material. It's a lot less of like a hardcore kind of drive or Norse core, less of like the kind of Gorgoroth like beat happening with some of it that you would get on the last record. It's that they're really good at the super fast, but they're really good at those like atmospheric, slow, like painful, agonizing parts. That a lot of that part of the black metal underground is very much known for. The raw stuff coming out of those countries I've been mentioning is very, just it's otherworldly, man. It definitely puts you in a different type of place than your average emperor or any of that kind of stuff. I'd say it's a lot more in line with like Burzum, kind of, or the early Burzum, the self-titled kind of stuff, or even not, me. I don't know any Norwegian, but whatever the one that's Until the Light Takes Us, it's got that kind of feel, but I feel like it's got different, like kind of influences. It's chaotic in a different way, I guess, instead of just being like kind of in its own thing. And again, I'm guessing Norway and Bosnia are completely different locations on the planet, so the cultural influence is definitely going to be something much different. So maybe that has something to do with it. But yeah, sum all that up, if you get the chance, check out like Black Gangrene Productions, any of that shit coming out of Bosnia or Portugal or any of these, more, third world or lesser known countries. Because usually they'll have a more intense and, raw, lo-fi kind of approach to the thing, and a lot more authentic and less of this fucking. Yeah, you do get a lot of posturing from stuff. This good stuff coming out. USA, if you want a great band of that ilk, check out Lamp of Murmur. Just as an example off the top of my head. So moving on from that, we're getting into grindcore. Yeah. So, band I've been into for a minute, and again, this is like, even if you're into gore grind and that kind of stuff, this is a tough listen for some people, mostly because of like how some people might find it kind of goofy or a little over the top with some of the production. It's one of those gore grind bands that definitely takes like the gimmick that they're going for and just pushes it to like ridiculous levels. And this band's gimmick is definitely like, take the snare sound from Saint Anger and play it like 500 BPMs and all these weird kind of, and it's something weird about the drum beats are almost hilarious on their own, but just being played on the tiniest like unsnared drum in existence is just fucking hilarious. And at the speed they're playing it at, it's like, I could see it being difficult to get into. I love it. I feel like it's really intense. I feel like it gets this like kind of feeling that, that modern, death grind, grindcore, mince grind, and all that kind of stuff. They go for this kind of over the top lo-fi and still be intense and goofy at the same time. A lot of times, a lot of bands that do that, like Arch Agathis, Haggis, the best bands that do that definitely, have their own like unique kind of trademark on the whole thing. They're catchy as hell, and this band's catchy as hell too. If you actually like listen to it over and over again, and pick up on what they're doing, because the first listen is just like, this is fucking ridiculous. So anyway, first album by these guys, Sulfuric Cautery, and it's called Chainsaws Clogged with the Undeveloped Brain Matter of Xenophobes. Just insanely fast, insanely energetic, insanely catchy, in my opinion. Just gore grind going just off the walls. Like I said, you got the tin snare happening. It just sounds like you put fucking Saint Anger on way the wrong speed. And also, I got this other record by them, which came out 2018, I believe. I don't remember when this came out. But it was with a band. It's a split with a band I'm really been into for a while. I believe like 2014, they had a tape. It's probably members of some other band. I don't know. But Horrible Pain. And they had a tape. This guy, Seth, who played in Gowl, Misanthropic Noise, I believe, at one point. He lives up in Stone Titan. He lives up in Canada, I believe, right now. I ran into him before COVID. But he gave me that tape years ago, so I was like, "Oh, this Horrible Pain tape is fucking amazing." But I hadn't really heard a lot of that band for a minute. I saw some live footage and stuff, looked pretty good. But they did a split with Sulfuric Cautery. There is the artwork. It's got this little, like, looks kind of like an Obis strip, but it's part of the cover itself. You got this ridiculous back cover, like surgery imagery. And yeah, both bands, do their typical kind of style of grind. Just very nasty, lo-fi, catchy, like extremely fast. A lot of the vocals I like on it, yeah, that would stand out like specifically in the vocals. But yeah, as far as like grindcore, they're probably the best I can find recently. So yeah, that's a band to get into if you have not heard them yet. And if anything that I said convinces you to check them out, I recommend it, because it's a lot of fun, and it's good fucking grindcore, and you can't go wrong with that if that's what you're looking for. So for my last new one, I want to go back to black metal for a minute and just spotlight this record. I kept grabbing by accident their first album, which I already have. It's a one-sided 12-inch EP with a nice little screen print on the B-side. But anyway, I made the order and made sure I had the right album this time. And yeah, this is one of my favorite albums of 2021. This is Grabenhold Heldentod. Nice little like artwork, and the back, that sick summoning shirt that guy has on. You can't really see it, but so Grabenhold, I've been into again for a minute. German black metal, pretty traditional. A lot of a bit of Ukrainian influence. I mean, that's not that rare in German hardcore. I mean, black metal. It's pretty common to have that Ukrainian early stuff, a little bit of Finnish. Thinking, you know, might be controversial to say, but Goat Moon a little bit as far as the riff. I'm not a Goat Moon fan, but I get it. For musical purposes, they fit that. Moonblood is a fellow German band. They definitely have some influence in there, but it does take a lot from like Summoning and Nocturnal Mortem, a couple of other Finnish bands. It comes together very well. It's very epic. It's got that power metal kind of feel, maybe a little Graveland. It just like amazing, like almost like Viking like vocals, almost calls back to a little Borknagar, or however you say that name. It's just really great atmosphere to the whole thing. Moves along very well for a black metal album, and for a modern black metal album. It's great to see that all the songs really do stand out in their own way, and they're memorable for their own melodies and sections and stuff. And it's up there with like the new Panopticon is really good, the new Holder, the new Paysage Diver, who's like cannot stop releasing just amazing material. It's been a good year for so many different types of music. And that Grab and Hold record definitely is one you should check out if you get the chance. And I'm pretty sure it's on Spotify. You can find it there. It's pretty widely available on vinyl and Iron Bonehead. You can pretty much get their stuff anywhere. So yeah. So that's gonna do it for the new acquisitions. I'm already 45 minutes into this, but that's cool. I want to try and do an hour and a half, if possible less. So I'll speed up the process a little bit, but I'll still have to dive in pretty deep with these records. So we'll see how it goes. If it goes a little long, it goes a little long. So up next, we are going to get started on. So these are all records that I've had for quite a while, and this show I really want to get into like different subjects, as I was saying before, genre guides and discography discussions and all that kind of stuff. And in the future, depending on how all of this works out, Chris Blush, my former co-host on the Night Cult podcast, will join me probably for a few of these, and I'll be able to bounce this stuff off of him, and probably a lot easier to listen to. But we're just getting started, man. I'm just going for it. So if you like this, like I said, go down to the comments and give me some suggestions for what you would want to hear me talk about, specific records or genres or whatever, man. I'm here to give you the good word of the vinyl record and how it can change your life for the better. I stand behind that 100%. So cheers. Yeah. So let's get into some classics. And I wanted to go like underrated with a lot of these. So I'm all over the place with just records I don't really hear as many people talk about them as I feel they should. But I feel like they're very important in my, musical discovery. So I've tried to, go a little bit more obscure as it goes along. But I'll start off with a record pretty much a lot of people know. But just I feel like a lot of the young people who get a lot of their musical influences in the hip-hop scene from this record and its surrounding, kind of scene down in Memphis. I feel like it's not as like represented in, you know, hip hop conversations as it could be. And, you know, it's a different kind of vibe to it. But feel like, you know, you get current guys, Little Ugly Mane, Space Ghost Perp, all these kind of modern, little bit of SoundCloud to them, but, you know, they got that lo-fi, very like horror movie inspired feel. And, you know, it's those pre-trap kind of beats. So, if you haven't figured it out yet, I am talking about the classic Mystic Styles, 3 6 Mafia, again, 1995. So there's a lot of 95 in this video, unintentionally. So 3 6 Mafia, you know, enormous band within that scene of, you know, kind of post-horrorcore, but we haven't quite gotten to like underground hip-hop and much later trap. This is before even, you know, a lot of the bling era stuff. I feel like that was more 97, 98. That stuff started really bubbling. But at 95, you know, people were still probably really into the Chronic and Coolio and, you know, Fuji's. The score was probably still bumping everywhere and stuff. You know, 95, we were still, that G-Funk era was still pretty apparent. You know, I was there, and that's all I was hearing until, you know, people like Ja Rule, Busta Rhymes, DMX, you know, that like next wave of like overhyped. You know, they're all good for what they did, minus Ja Rule. I've never really thought he was that good at anything. But, you know, they all had their own lane that they went for, you know. But a lot of that stuff, you know, after 95 is just kind of, you know, they were trying to cash in after Biggie and Pac got killed. They were trying to cash in on that kind of sound still. And there was a lot of that. And that pretty much led to the bling era, where I feel like a lot of them were trying to distance themselves from the like ultra masculine, ultra violent kind of image of it. You know, that's why it became all about cars and what money they have, and became a lot less about, you know, pimping and guns and stereotypical tropes of the prior generation. But it also lost a lot of that, you know, like edge to it. And, you know, a lot of the later era horrorcore stuff that was capitalizing on stuff, on early stuff like, you know, Ghetto Boys, Esham, even Insane Clown Posse's earlier material. A lot of this stuff that was coming out of the underground, even though, you know, you hear it everywhere, it really took a long time for people to catch on to. And it's even weirder with 3 6 Mafia, because this is like a Grammy, I'm pretty sure the Grammy or Oscar, something, Academy Award winning band, because they were involved in Hustle and Flow. You know, they became really big off of that. I'm pretty sure they won a Grammy too. I'm not too knowledgeable on that kind of history, but, you know, a lot of people do think of them very highly in the bling era, because they did make that transition, you know, as No Limit and Cash Money and all these other type of labels were starting to blow up. They did transition a bit more into that Cash Money kind of sound with the, like when the Smoke Clears, whatever that album's called, the one with sipping on some scissor and everything like that. And that was a big, you know, underground album. You know, it got everybody kind of on board with that sound. But the earlier records are a lot more lo-fi, a lot more in line with the horrorcore kind of creepy, you know, early Ghetto Boys. You know, Grave Diggers was another one that was doing it very well at that time. You had other stuff like the Flatliners, which I feel like is a little gimmicky in retrospect. You had some other big, you know, groups doing it and stuff. But I feel like 3 6 Mafia really did it in a way that was kind of like new and exciting, because they brought that, you know, very satanic, intense Bands, groups like Gravediggers and Wu-Tang would be bringing up a lot of these subjects, these dark, like satanic kind of subjects, but it would still be in that kind of Wu-Tang fucking mythology of it all. And Gravediggers more in the like kind of higher consciousness, like third eye opening kind of stuff. And 3 6 Mafia was much more street level, much more just about, like gang culture and the satanic kind of stuff, which was always going on in, a lot of those southern gangs. So yeah, it's just this combination of the really lo-fi beats, and the triplet flow. This is probably like the first time that, what Migos and a lot of modern people have done, the triplet flow. You can hear a lot of that in Juicy J and a lot of the members. It's amazing just as a group, all the different stuff. And Gangsta Boo, out of like the whole group, I love her flow. I love like her like rhyme schemes and everything. She's just got this like great like she's a very unique voice, especially in like female hip hop in the mid 90s. You had this kind of idea of like the female hip hop, at least in my experience, it was a lot more playful, a lot more aligned with like R&B. You had people like Lil Kim, the Brat, who were a lot of them had street cred for sure, but they definitely did mold into more of like a singer, R&B singer kind of direction, which is great. For them, it was a lot more profitable, and a lot of that late 90s stuff out of Atlanta. I'm thinking in Vogue and some of the groups that the Dungeon family would work with. That stuff is kicks. It's fucking great, and especially for a genre that I'm not as familiar with. It definitely does stand out. So yeah, to sum all this up, fucking if you haven't gotten the chance to listen to Mystic Styles, I would. If you dig any modern trap, any of the Metro Boomin kind of stuff, that kind of, you love Gravediggers, any of that, even like some Aesop Rock stuff you could hear in some of the production. Later on, Company Flow has a different. They're more like sci-fi and more like lyrical and everything like that. But it's got a similar kind of like street vibe to it to me. It's just that mid '90s before it became, like the underground was all about Cool Keith and MF Doom, Dell. Which those are all amazing on their own right, but before that, all kind of exploded in popularity. It was definitely that 3-6 Memphis sound that was holding it down for that real, just cult underground Southern hip hop. So up next, this is a band that a lot of people know. And, it's a very widely discussed band, especially their later material post 2003, which, I'm not really a big fan of because they did go in a musical direction that doesn't really appeal to me. And after the record I'm about to talk about, that really became kind of apparent. The one after it, I really do like. A little bit more melodic, a little bit more produced. The next one was the one that really put them over the top and exposed them to, a mainstream audience for the first time. But I was always listening to this band like mid 90s on whenever I found them, probably 97, 98, because The Offspring was an early, band I found as a kid. They covered one of their songs on the Me, Myself, and Irene soundtrack. And I remember hearing this. I'm like, yo, this song's dope. But I couldn't find it on any, like, Offspring release. So I would go digging and find out about it. And, if you watch the credits at the end of the movie, it, lists all the soundtrack credits, and it said based on a song or a cover of a song by AFI. So I went looking and I found AFI, and it's like, cool. They're on, at that time they were on Nitro Records, which is Dexter Holland's label. They started probably off after they moved to a major, because the earliest thing I can remember seeing off of Nitro Records was the debut Offspring record from the 80s, Repress, because I feel like that was a hard album to come across for a minute. And it's expensive as shit. If you find an original online with the original fucking Alien Burst cover, it's going to cost $150. I don't see it going any lower than that. And it's only getting higher and higher as I keep looking. So, but it's what it is. So, like I said, that led me to AFI. And luckily around that time, probably 98, 99, I don't know, my telling of time is a little off, but they released probably two of their best albums and their most like iconic for me. That is the EP, All Hallows Eve, which I do not have a copy of, but it's you can get it pretty much everywhere. And this album, which is same year, 1999, I want to say, right before they released their next album, which was The Art of Drowning, which was a lot more produced, still really heavy, like fast hardcore, what they were known for, but it was definitely going more in like a gothic kind of, new wave a little bit direction, definitely a lot of like Cure influence, but spoiled it already by having it in the camera. But yeah, so my next album, Black Sails, In the Sunset. And to be honest, this is probably my favorite late 90s, that fucking kind of melodic punk rock. And AFI I always loved because they were definitely like a modernized version of the Misfits at this time. They would have a lot of, kind of definitely down to Davey Havok's voice in the early years. He would definitely be doing that Danzig kind of vocal, the very just like a higher pitched kind of Danzig at times. And it's cool to like go back to a lot of that stuff because Davey played on the Son of Sam record, which was members of Samhain, however you fucking say it, but with Davey on vocals. And I love that album. I feel like it's extremely overlooked. It's goofy. It's got like way too much production glam on it. And, the fucking some of the melodies are really cheesy, but it's like it's got that AFI feel to it with that dark metallic Samhain feel, and that's an amazing record. But unfortunately, every time I see it, it's like a little bit out of my price range. Usually 100. I think I've been seeing it at lately. So, if I have 100 on me next time I come across it, I'll definitely pick that up. But yeah, like as far as Black Sails though, it's like the emotional grip of that album is so like intense, man. And it's like up until then, they were definitely this melodic, but they had more of like a youth kind of feel to it. They were all probably teenagers on like Very Proud of You and Answer That and Stay Fashionable, because they definitely come off as like, just kids going for it as fast as possible. But they always had really great lyrics, and they also had very great like melodies. It's that trademark of AFI, especially on Black Sails, of the whoa chorus and the big sing along and everybody getting in on it and stuff. It's just like the hooks are amazing. Some of the best lyrics of the time coming out of a band like that. It's just insane how many different places this record goes. And, it's a very emotionally gripping record. Clove Smoke Catharsis. being the long ballad that, closes out the first side, is very, emotionally charged, and it's got this beautiful guitar tone to it, and it's very ballady, but it's also very like loud and aggressive and vulnerable in a lot of ways. You got songs like Prayer Position that starts off the second side, which has, this great like kind of communal message of the lyrics, and it's all about kind of, finding a gathering, outside of yourself, that isn't, so much, in my experience of the song, it's not so much guided by like a higher power, but this power within yourself to do, something for your community. It's a lot more about like, a community over, a religion or a dogma. And I respect a lot of that, and the ending with God Called in Sick Today is just devastating song, and just the whole album, just I could go on about it for a while. It's just got that like perfect late 90s kind of aesthetic to it. And I'm a sucker for a lot of that stuff, Pulley, Deviates. I really love some of the later Dwarves material when they turned into like a pop punk band, and a lot of that shit I should not be able to stand. It's almost like Everything Sucks by Descendants. I really love that record. There's some great Coffee Mug, When I Get Old. There's some jams on that record that just like you can't deny it, and it's like I love the Descendants. I don't give a fuck. It's one of my favorite bands of all time because they have this consistency and they have this amazing, lyrical, melodic, talent. And it's like, that time period, there's a lot of great stuff going on. The Epitaph and Nitro, even Fat Records to an extent, even though a lot of that stuff has not aged as well. Even Nitro has a couple of bands like Guttermouth and stuff that I'm not really that big on anymore. But AFI definitely stands out, and definitely like Black Sails in the Sunset if you want like a ridiculously good late 90s pop punk, skate punk, whatever you want to call it, kind of record. Definitely get into Black Sails in the Sunset. It's probably one of my top 10 records of all time. So hopefully that convinces you. And it's going up in status all the time. So earlier I talked about Zulo. So I wanted to bring up another great Japanese band, a lot more obscure than Zulo, probably in some circles. This band I found in 2003 or 4, going to my favorite record store back in the day, which is Mystery Train in Amherst, Massachusetts, which is still there, new location. And I went in there one day, and they always had a great stacked, just insane stuff in their 45s. So, I'd go through the vinyl. I'd have like the big pile. Just they had one of those listening stations, an old record player. I just play everything I could get, just learn stuff. And if anything I couldn't get in the store, I would go out and download it or just make a mental note of stuff that I wanted. I always had like Christmas lists. I just like bombard them with like, here's a record, here's where you can get it, all that kind of shit. So they had a 7-inch there, and I had all this Japanese writing on it. I was new to a lot of this stuff. It's probably 2003 because I don't think I had found Maximum Rock and Roll quite yet, which was this big like thing for me to find, international stuff that wasn't being talked about, and you couldn't. This is way before goddamn MySpace and all the groups and everything like that. So you really had to kind of dig. Luckily, a lot of labels that started in the late 90s releasing a lot of great, rare stuff. Havoc, definitely Hardcore Holocaust. They would release a lot of like current stuff. Both of them would release a lot of current stuff. Deranged maybe had some retro kind of stuff. There was all these great labels in Japan still going. I remember a couple of advertisements for people like Record Shop Answer in Japan and all these other places that would have, you know, PO boxes you could write to that you found in the back of Maximum Rock and Roll. So, you know, that was a big deal because, you know, I'd make out all these lists of stuff I needed to order and all that kind of shit. So all these labels were starting to dig into the archives of stuff from 20 years before and just be like, yo, this needs to be heard. And, you know, it was the beginning I noticed of a lot of these discography double records right before, you know, it's about 5 or 6 years before the record boom really kicked into high gear around 2009, I'd say. And, yeah, so they had a 7-inch, you know, their 7 inches were always really cheap. I remember getting Fear of God's Pneumatic Slaughter there for like $250 or something. And one of those 450 7-inches was by a band called Asbestos, and it was put out by Hibachi Records. Yeah, I was loving it. It had all this cool like little discharge kind of stuff going on with it. They had a really great logo on the cover. I was like, dude, Asbestos, like that shit that fucking gives you cancer and walls and shit. I'm like, that's intense. So yeah, I picked that 7-inch up, and holy shit, that was probably like one of the initial like Japanese hardcore records that I remember finding. That and like Gauze Fuckheads and Gizm's Detestation, which I found through the Peace Comp from the 80s that MDC put out that also had Execute. And it's Italy's Raw Power was on there too. So I had a lot of that kind of stuff. But yeah, Asbestos was very early on for me. And it was more, that record, the 7-inch, was a lot more metallic. It was a current release. I believe it came out in 2002. So it was like a year before I found it. But it definitely had a lot more of like a thrash crossover, heavier feel and a lot of stuff. So anyway, yeah, like I got that. I would play it all the fucking time. And I'm like, yo, what's this band Asbestos? So luckily a couple years later, I'd say, I believe 2005 or 6, when I was getting into buying a lot of this stuff from Havoc. Havoc was re-releasing a lot of Restitute, and that sort of finish, some Japanese, can't remember what off the top of my head, Proteste, Tempere SS for more of that Finnish stuff. And, you know, I was all about that Finnish shit. You know, that was like fucking amazing to me. But, you know, I always loved the Japanese stuff for like totally different reasons. You know, it's just got a different vibe. It's a lot more like militaristic a lot of times and stuff. So luckily, Putrid Filth Conspiracy, who was like a really big label back at this time, putting out these kind of compilations. I think they even put out the Gas compilation. It was another really under talked about Japanese band. They put out a really good flexi called No More Hiroshimas, which was more on the noisier side. And they went more in like a Visual Kai kind of glam, almost like a stunk with female vocals. Really great record called Resurrection. That is totally different from No More Hiroshimas. But so anyway, they put out a double record of the out of print material from Asbestos called In the Memory of the War Victim. And this one's cool because they have the gatefold with the amazing logo that got me addicted to this band and a nice little photo collage. So Asbestos, this material, as opposed to the 7-inch, is a lot more of that traditional Japanese, a lot of Kuro and Gizm kind of riffage. A little bit of the Clay early material, if you know the Clay's stuff, which I feel like not a lot of people talk about either. If once I get some of that, I'll show it off. But they have one album that's just like one of their flexies is just fucking classic. Yeah, it's in a more noisy kind of cultist, underground Japanese hardcore stuff. So like Asbestos though was a lot more epic. They have a lot more of that like proto, a little bit of like Bathory feel to them, or a little bit of Venom, along with the very noisy Japanese. It's almost got like a Viking samurai feel to it, because it does feel very Nordic at times, but it's also got that very like samurai like tense feel. The vocals are really good. It's got your like Sakevi kind of vocals, more straight ahead. There's actual like lyrics to this band, I'd imagine, and it's not as like unhinged. It's a lot more straightforward, more of a growl. Typical with a lot of they have a sound that would later on bands like Forward and maybe a lot of these bands around the same time, but the Burning Spirits scene definitely has a lot of influence coming from bands like Asbestos. So yeah, like this album is great. It's got all their early demos and couple of 7-inches and the Final Solution LP, which I know is like $2,000 on Discogs last time I looked. So this is a great way to get all these records in like one place, and they all have like great songs on them, especially like the Final Solution. Resistance is a really great song. Nightmare. Just all around, just amazing band. Asbestos. If you haven't listened to them yet, just take a chance on it. Other than that, for Japanese stuff, just to sum that up, Nightmare is another band. Asfort. I always rap Gastunk really hardcore. If you can get into the album Dead Song, there's like some amazing musicianship on that record, and the singer, I can never remember his name, he's also an Execute, he's one of the best Japanese punk vocalists of all time, bar none. And Gastunk has like so much different kind of material later on. They go more into that visual kai kind of thing, but it's like that shit's cool a lot of times. It almost sounds like some over the top satanic anime Saturday morning cartoon type of shit. I love it. You can't go wrong. All right, so moving on. Got a few more. I'll try to speed this up a bit. So going to a completely different time period. And I'm going to talk about another discography kind of thing after this. But, just to go off on a tangent a little bit again. 60s. A lot of psychedelic records, a lot of classic kind of underground stuff from the 60s. A lot of people just pretty much overlook. It comes down to like a lot of critics will automatically go to like one of the heights of late 60s psychedelic, Delia being, like, Satanic Majesties. I feel like less people would say that, though. Maybe Magic Bus, obviously. Sgt. Pepper was a huge album. A lot of people would even talk about the first King Crimson record, which I talk about a lot. I feel like that was more in line with the progressive scene. You go a little bit more underground. Arthur Brown a few years ago started getting more attention because he was playing a lot of these metal fests, and different documentaries on shock rock and prog and everything were really spotlighting him. But I feel like a lot of people we're not getting into Kingdom Come or the Crazy World of Arthur Brown, even, some related bands to that, like Atomic Rooster. They didn't get into a lot of those until like a little bit later when those records started getting repressed and more widely available. And I know it was really hard to find a lot of that stuff on Spotify when it first went up, and I'm pretty sure Crazy World of Arthur Brown still isn't on Spotify, but I might be wrong. But another record that was really good from the 60s, around 67, I believe, which is really crazy because, like, at that time, it's 68. So it's around the same time that, Sgt. Pepper was like the big thing. And even, like Magical Mystery Tour. I feel like not a lot of people like that album. I prefer it over Sgt. Pepper personally. But I remember finding this album. They had like Mojo's best left field records of all time. You have a Trout Mask Replica, a couple Mercury Rev records, some other weird ass shit. I'm reading through it. It's like 1967, 68. Just very, very. This thing is even like kind of heavier and more like avant-garde. If you listen to Sgt. Pepper, you hear a lot of stuff where it's like you did all this crazy stuff in the studio. It's cool to go back to that time period and like, how did they do this on late 60s technology, especially in Britain? But this band, they were much more about like kind of like what Pink Floyd was doing around this time. They definitely went in a more classical direction. Jazz was definitely a big thing. Avant classical, John Cage, AMM, maybe a little bit of Pia Schaeffer, all the early avant-garde, Edgar Varese, who he was turned on to a lot of people by Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, Stravinsky, John Coltrane, Miles Davis, Ornette Coleman, Charles Mingus. All these things were like happening readily at this time. You also had the underground garage rock of the Count Five, the Electric Prunes, the Sonics. That stuff was becoming really big in America. You had a lot of the bands that would cut their chops in Hamburg, Germany early on, make it over to back to Britain, and they'd become huge celebrities, stuff like Hermits. And out of that German sound, you also got one of the most interesting albums nobody knew about until 10 years ago, which is the Monks, Black Monk Time. Amazing proto-punk, bizarre story I told once on Night Cult. I believe it's episode 2 or 3. So if you want to go back and find that, I definitely recommend it. It was a fun conversation to have. But right now I want to talk to you about the self-titled United States of America record. And this is interesting because I'm not really that familiar with a lot of the story behind this record. The names and stuff. I don't know who went on to do other things, but it's definitely got like that future sound that you get from a lot of like Freak Out by the Mothers, or even parts of Surrealistic Pillow by Jefferson Airplane. These are big deal records within the late 60s. Even 13th Floor Elevators, Psychedelic Sounds. This was a lot, like I said before, it was a lot more in the classical world. There's a lot more taken from jazz and kind of satire, a little bit of Dada. It's a record that I feel like maybe at that time, not a lot of people really understood what it was saying, and the type of ideas it had were not really implemented into popular culture until like the 80s. And from the sound of the record, they were definitely doing a lot more out there experiments than even some of the stuff on Sgt. Pepper or Pet Sounds or any of these like monumental big late 60s records that took all these risks. And yeah, they did take a lot of risks, but if you listen to something like this is a band that definitely did not blow up from it until probably a few decades later. And it's just really fun to go back to and be like, how did they come up with this stuff, especially on the technology that they had at their disposal in 1967, wherever they ended up recording this. In Germany, they probably had a really good setup. Maybe it was recorded partially in Germany, but it has a very American sense to it, like an atmosphere of Americana. It's got different mashups. Like the whole album starts off with this like distant carousel kind of sound on like an old 78, it sounds like, and then you get this very high vocoder style vocal. It's a female vocal, which aside from the more soul type of stuff going on at that time, like Mamas and the Papas and Janis Joplin, Jefferson Airplane, it was a lot more kind of esoteric and otherworldly. And this is an album that I feel like was really big for a lot of krautrock coming out of Germany. Bands like Tangerine Dream and Can, even Kraftwerk and Neu. I hear a lot of this record, a lot of the stuff that this record did very early on in the late 60s, duplicated in the early 70s and later 70s material coming out of a lot of these German bands, and even Brian Eno. I'm trying to think. Probably like Talking Tiger Mountain, I'd say, has sort of a similar feel. Maybe Another Green World at times too. The ambient stuff, you can definitely see stuff on this record, like what starts off the second side, which is Where Is Yesterday, which is this like very chant heavy. It's almost got a feel of the Monks, just not as playful. It's a lot more dogmatic kind of sounding and nihilistic, and there's a lot of dread to this record. So it's got a lot of these like overdone American tropes, and they're playing with different kinds of nuclear family ideas and all that kind of stuff. And but it's doing it from a very twisted, satirical, very nihilistic at times kind of mindset. And it's definitely like a record that puts you into this kind of headspace that's like can be kind of disturbing. And that's what's really heavy about it, is it's the late 60s. There was a lot of stuff that was like getting into the apocalyptic kind of feel, but it was always more optimistic. You always had this kind of, this album ends and it just feels like everything just fell apart. It's definitely set up like a rock opera before Tommy was even a thing. I feel like it was one of the first albums to really use the album format, and it's this concept. It's got this whole like all the songs blend together in their own way. Even at the end of the album, it does the old like replay of different motifs throughout the album and different clips of songs and vocal lines and stuff. And other than that, the more fast, aggressive kind of tracks like Love Coming Down, Garden of Earthly Delights, Hard Coming Love. There's like a lot of songs on this record that are just like, they have that drive to them, and the female vocalist that they have definitely has like a that soulful kind of voice, less in the way of like a Grace Slick or a Janis Joplin, more in the way of like Joan Jett or even like Blondie. I feel like Deborah Harry and this female singer have a lot in common as far as their kind of seductive, but also very punk rock and urgent, aggressive vocal. And, that's why I also compare it to Joan Jett, because she, at certain parts in her career, had that very seductive but urgent and very aggressive kind of bulldog kind of vocal to her. And this is a lot more in that classical vein. I'm not trying to make it out like she was this big, like, rocker kind of vocal. It's very subdued. It's very vulnerable. It's very angry and aggressive. It's definitely a sound that not many female artists were using at that time. Maybe a little bit later on with Heart, as weird as that may sound, because they're a pretty mainstream band. But I feel like a lot of the vocals in Heart, definitely, Crazy on You and stuff, yeah, it's just got a lot of that feel to it. I feel like even stuff like Fleetwood Mac can share a little bit of the vocal style of this. Definitely Christine McVie over Stevie Nicks. But yeah, no, it's United States of America. One of those records not many people talk about, that I've always loved, and I always feel like is underrepresented in the story of the late 1960s kind of psychedelic explosion. And if you love that type of stuff, 13 Full Elevators, Crazy World of Arthur Brown, the early the stuff by The Nice with Keith Emerson, even ELP, Kraftwerk, a lot of the German stuff I mentioned earlier, Can. Totally hear a lot of this in Can. And even if you love like good jazz, like harsh jazz, like a lot of the like fusion stuff that Miles Davis was doing at that time, or even a little bit of like Ornette Coleman influence in there as well, check that out, man. That shit's just great. All right, so I got 3 more records. One of them I'm gonna do on its own. It's another discography. This time from Finland. This is a band like I've never heard anybody talk about. But they had a very, great career of like, split 7 inches. I believe they did one with Disrupt. Yep, Disrupt. And then they had a long they're on the Chaos tribute double 7-inch. They have a couple of comp appearances. They have an LP. A lot of this stuff, is pretty available. You can get like most of what's on here for under $10. Most of these records. But I found this for like $13, I want to say, back in the day. And I believe I got it off of Crimes Against Humanity records, which I don't believe exists anymore. It might in some capacity, but they were great. Another one of those sort of like Hardcore Holocaust or Profane Existence would release a lot of like really great stuff. They were doing a lot of great distribution. I feel like that was their more thing. I bet they put out records on their own. This is put out by Power It Up in Germany, which is still pretty common today. I see a lot of classic Agathocles stuff coming out on Powered Up and Tevi Cadet and a lot of the Finnish stuff. So this was like early on in my Finnish discovery, a lot of the Finnish hardcore and stuff. And this band's a lot more in the Tevi Cadet, ultra fast, a little bit of Bastards influence, and it's almost a little bit of proto power violence and grindcore, almost like Asocial out of Sweden, even like a little bit of Deep Wound out of Boston. So yeah, this is, I cannot pronounce the name, so apologies for that. Whatever it is, Lapset. It's just a discography, and you get the inner sleeve with some great artwork and the discography track listing. And this was mind blowing to me back in the day because I wasn't used to the ultra fast kind of stuff. It would be a couple more years probably until I found Heavy Cadet and really got deeply into them. Their stuff was not as widely available. A little bit of Malika. They were a really great band. They had a discography come out on Partners of Crime, which is really expensive now, and you can't find it in the States at all. Just fast, different vocalists. I believe it's got like a few vocalists on it throughout the years. There's one I believe is female, but I can't tell. And with a lot of that Finnish stuff, a lot of these guys they would have on vocals were like 13 years old. I mean, if you listen to the Cadgers split with Chaos, Cadgers would go on to become Restitute. You listen to that and like Jacques, rest in peace, on vocals, sounds fucking 12. Like it reminds me of the Crippled Youth Join the Fight 7-inch. It's just like really aggressive, but it's got this like psychotic, like tiny person yelling on it. It's great. And the great thing about a lot of that Finnish stuff is their use of reverb on the vocals. They have a very goth kind of aesthetic to a lot of it, a very like death rock. I feel like a lot of these like death rock kind of Finnish bands are really into like Batcave bands coming out, Bauhaus, Alien Sex Fiend, maybe some of the American stuff, Beneath the Shadows by TSOL, The Damned, especially with the Black Album and Phantasmagoria. The more darker stuff, Killing Joke obviously was influencing pretty much everybody in like these gothic hardcore scenes. A lot of the crust guys, later on Amoebics and Deviated Instinct, and even Hell Bastard, I feel like was really repping a lot of that Killing Joke stuff. Gang of Four was still like the early Gang of Four stuff was pretty popular still. A lot of that post-punk kind of stuff, and it's got a lot of that, the riffs that are very epic and depressing all at the same time. The very like 30-second blasts of just like screaming and just like buzzed out guitars and stuff. I gotta say, a lot of these have that great guitar tone, and it's like a lot of these songs kind of blend together. It's got that same kind of proto power violence, proto grind, not quite a blast beat. It's still somewhere between a D beat and the cheat beat or whatever they would call it. And like, but it's just moves along at such a good pace. The vocals are very well laid out. They're not like right on the beat. It's a little bit off, and that almost like helps it at times. And it's a very good listen. It goes off in some pretty cool territories. There's some stuff that reminds me of like later era Chaotic Discord, or there's some stuff that reminds me of the Japanese records that like Extreme Noise Terror would do. Some of it's like way more noisier than a lot of stuff from that era. I believe this was like late 80s, maybe a lot of early 90s material was called for this. And yeah, so that in particular, that record right there is really good to pick up. And like, if you can, search out the original 7-inches, because like I said, they're usually under like $10 a piece. Some of them are even under like $5 a piece. You can find them fairly cheap, and it's good material. And especially that Disrupt split has a lot of really great material. And Disrupt is always killing it. So these last two records, kind of different eras, but same kind of scene, because these guys did records on the same label. Both out of New York to an extent, and that label was Blackout, and Blackout was a big deal in the late 80s for variety of different releases. I believe they did the Breakdown record, They probably did some stuff with rest in pieces. I have a couple of their releases, but these two really, well, this one, the other release is from much later. This one release really stands out for me as like a really undersung, great New York hardcore record. That, you know, it sounds very much ahead of its time. If you listen to a lot of these songs, they do have a vibe of the 90s. You know, there's some like integrity kind of riffage on this. This is from '89. So it's around that time period a lot of those bands are starting out, but they were a lot more like metallic. They shared more with stuff like Super Touch and Into Another, the more like proggier bands coming out of there's a lot of Dag Nasty. And it still has that like Judge groove to it. It's still got that like punch to it. Some of it reminds me of Inside Out, which was the first band that Zach De La Rocha became known for. They put out a really great 7-inch. If you haven't heard that, what the fuck are you doing? But yeah, so Uppercut, Four Walls. Again, an album I don't really hear a lot of talk about, you know, in this day and age, 89, 88. There's a lot of albums from that era that are getting a lot of new respect. Killing Times, Bright Side has been pretty big the last few years. Definitely Leeway, Born to Expire has been pretty big. Stuff like there's just a lot of like Vision, a couple of those early Vision records, Token Entry. There's a ton of great stuff coming out of New York, and you know, Uppercut definitely has a little bit in common with that, you know, like Youth Crew sound. You know, there's quite a bit of bold actually in Uppercut. I said Judge earlier, but they do the melodies and the guitar playing and these little like metallic riff fests definitely call to mind Bold and Chain of Strength. There's some Dag Nasty. The vocals are very Inside Out. Some of the early Neurosis stuff. It's got a lot of variety to it. Like the hooks are really good. Some sing-along elements to it. The song Salvation, it has that early kind of New York croon, Paul Bearer style vocal. Later on, you know, that'd be big with stuff like Life of Agony on the River Runs Red record. So, yeah, you know, like Uppercut was a big deal within all that. And another band, I don't want to pull their like Blackout record because that's one that's pretty much been talked to death. It's known as their, you know, prototypical record. But this record was put out after the singer Paul Bearer. I just ruined it for everybody in there, but whatever. After Paul Bearer had broken up this band in 2006, I believe they had their final show at CBGB's, documented on their excellent Beaten by the Fists of God documentary Last Show DVD, which is amazing. It's got really good interviews with Life of Agony, Rob from Blood for Blood and Ramallah, the guy from Northside Kings. I don't think it's the one that beat up Danzig, but close enough. So yeah, that was a big, you know, documentary, and you know, a lot of people were talking about them, and a lot of us kids, you know, we weren't around in the '90s, so we didn't get to see Sheer Terror. So it was all these like word of mouth from older guys about like going to see Sheer Terror in like the '80s and just the most violent bands around. You know, New York was known for a lot of this. You know, in the '90s, you had like Oxblood and a lot of these like skinhead bands that were coming up, and they had very violent reputations. But I feel like, and even Blood for Blood in Boston was a really big thing with this very violent fighter, and they did take a lot from Paul Bearer's kind of, you know, lyrics, and the thing with this band that a lot of people don't realize is, you know, they had a different kind of sense of humor than most other bands. You know, Paul obviously with his stand up in between songs and the way he would, you know, play with the crowd and stuff. You know, very fun. You know, there's something to be said about this band and their great live shows and how much of a party their live shows are. And they're one of my favorite bands to see live. I saw them back in July or June at Cherry Street, and dude, that was like worth every minute, you know, worth the wait to go see them and just go fucking ape shit. So 2006 happened. They had their big final show, and all the members pretty much just like went their own ways. Probably played in different bands, but around 2014, I remember at This Is Hardcore, either 2013 or 14, they came out and did a set with a new lineup. Paul Bearer is still on vocals and some younger musicians behind him, and he's kept a few of them. There's a couple of lineup changes since then, but this is pretty much the band that he's been going out with since then. I saw them finally in New York, I think 2015 or even 14. I saw them at their 30th anniversary show with Slapshot. It was at Williamsburg Music Hall. It kind of sucked because I don't like anybody that goes to that place. And just from that one experience, I will never fucking go back to anything in Williamsburg if I can help it. Unless it's a smaller club, I guess. But I was not a fan of the venue. And, you know, it sucked because, you know, the Slapshot's one of my favorite bands of all time as well. But anyway, enough, you know, trying to hide it. This is Sheer Terror's 2014 record, Standing Up for Falling Down. This is Sheer Terror, you know, classic. Like, no, didn't even miss a minute. There's a lot more of the kind of stuff they were doing on Love Songs to the Unloved, which I believe is like late 90s, maybe 95 at the earliest. That had a different sound because at that time, you know, you had Hatebreed coming up and they're kind of more chuggy kind of sound. They did borrow a little bit from the more metallic side of Sheer Terror, much like, you know, Blood for Blood, Integrity, Life of Agony. A lot of these like big bands in the later 90s would adapt that sound, whether it's the croon of some of the more melodic sides of Sheer Terror or the more aggressive, depressing sides of stuff like Cup of Joe and Twisting and Turning, you know, any of the big, like, real nihilist, Roses, Walls, all these, like, more introspective lyrics. And that's what was great about Paul Bearer is he got into these lyrical styles that not a lot of people would do. You know, they're all doing the tough guy thug thing. You know, it's all my friends, my family, we got to unite and all that kind of shit. And he's more talking about suicide and, you know, heartache and all this other stuff. And, you know, just hearing him talk a lot of times in interviews when he's not doing the whole on-stage shtick, he does have like a ridiculously deep and, you know, very well cataloged knowledge of music of all different kinds. You know, he's deep into the reggae stuff. You know, I've seen him spin once or twice at the Skinhead Reggae Nights, and dude knows his stuff, man. And you could tell within Sheer Terror's music. And on this record, this is like the LP from 2014. This record definitely got a lot more of the variety to it. It's not just all like just metal bangers and really like doomy kind of stuff. There's like elements of oi. There's like a lot of like different types of, you know, song structures, and, you know, the lyrics are still as biting as ever. You know, they're still, you know, just as, you know, potent as ever. You know, he gets into this like and a mindset that he knows very well. Because, you know, if you've ever seen him in interviews or met him, I've heard, I haven't actually met him at any show I've been to. You know, he's always kind of not trying to be the center of attention unless he's on stage. He is a very, very dark, kind of morbid person. And it comes out in the lyrics very much so. He's very self-deprecating, but in a very intelligent way. And it's like he does play like the dumb, like, I'm a tough guy. Like, he does play that role on stage. But if you actually listen to these lyrics, he's a very hurt person, and he's got a lot of these like vulnerabilities to him. And hearing a lot of that is so eye-opening for a young dude getting into hardcore, because I found these guys very early on, you know, got the DVDs some night at the LNG and just watched it all the time. And, you know, they were known as the Violent Band. And even a few years ago when I saw him in Tompkins, I talked about this yesterday, you know, he had to deal with the fact that the Proud Boys wanted to sing their songs and wear their shirts and all this other stuff. And if you get the opportunity, look up that show from Tompkins Square Park 2018. It's on Hate 56's YouTube channel. Just go back in time a little bit. You could probably find it. The Killing Time footage is really good too, but it's what Paul says about political correctness and this whole thing of like the alt-right getting involved. And, you know, there's a few people that would stand up to the alt-right back then. You know, a few of them had fallen off and sided with a lot of those fuckers due to this COVID division that we got going on here. And I'm not trying to be political or anything like that. And I'm not trying to speak for anybody's like ideology and stuff. But at this point, I don't give a fuck. You should get the fucking vaccine and don't use your like platform that you've been like given to, you know, promote bullshit like ivermectin. You know, like you got to take that fucking responsibility, man. And that's why I like people like, you know, Paul Bearer. You know, he does have this image to him that is this hate dude or this fucking guy who's like a straight up Nazi or something. He's said in many interviews, he's like, oh, I listen to so much like soul music and black music and all this other stuff. And definitely like Sheer Terror as a hate band doesn't make a lot of sense if you actually read their lyrics and read their like allegiances and read what, you know, Paul is actually saying. You know, it's very much like a, you know, it's working class. Of course, it's got that working class skinhead feel to it because it's Paul, and like, that's who he is. He can't, you know, fucking hide that, and he's not trying to, you know, make it something it's not. It's definitely, though, like, it's a lot more personal. It's a lot more painful. It's a lot more relatable for a person who isn't like, you know, Lower East Side, and yeah, you got your crew, I got my crew, all that kind of shit, you know, like Warzone. Like, I love Warzone, and those are amazing records in their own way, but it's like, this is a different thing. This is the more isolated, the pain, the, you know, the more in your face kind of emotion. And I feel like that would lead to a lot of great bands later on. A lot of great stuff coming out of Boston, you know, like I know fucking Hammer Bros and Shark Attack and a lot of those like era of bands, Mother of Mercy, you know, the more obituary and like death metal kind of riffage over like posse hardcore, you know, Lewd Axe. A lot of those bands I do hear a lot of Sheer Terror in, just as much as I hear it in Blood for Blood and a lot of that late 90s New York kind of stuff. Madball, Life of Agony. Even later on, Life of Agony, as they went in a more kind of alternative rock. Still hardcore, though. And if you listen to Ugly, I still feel like that's a great album. It's not as like pummeling as River Runs Red. It's a different kind of emotion. And that's what I love about Life of Agony is almost every album has a different kind of feel to it, depending on where the members of the band are in at that time. And, I like how they still do River Runs Red, because a lot of those lyrics, have different meanings now as the members get older. It's just like, that's a band that I always respect them, not trying to retread, the same territory with every record, and really just reinventing themselves. And definitely Sheer Terror is like one of the best bands to do that, because now you see them and they're doing all their hardcore classics and stuff, but they really do go into these like ballads and these great like reggae inspired songs. And one of the best videos ever is Paul Bearer at some Joe Strummer gala meal, or whatever you want to fucking call it, tribute meal, up on stage doing the card sheet off of London Calling, which is one of the best underrated or not fucking Clash songs of all time, and definitely one of Joe Strummer's greatest songs. If it was just, that had to be Strummer. I mean, it's got that like Springsteen feel to it, and he'll bust into that song, and it's just, his voice fits perfectly. It's got that gruff to it, but it's also that pain, and he is amazing at like channeling that pain in all the right ways. And it's just, not enough can be said for Sheer Terror. One of the best live bands, one of the best, stories of any band of that era, just all the different stuff that they went through, and all the different wars with like each other, and labels, and the failed tours that they would go on, and all this stuff in Europe. So yeah, if anything, if you get the chance, check out Beaten by the Fist of God, the documentary about Sheer Terror. I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube. And after that, check out the live set from Tompkins Square Park in 2018, I believe. And so that's it. Holy shit, I went 2 fucking hours pretty much. And not a lot of people talking up, but whatever. As time goes on, I probably get more people talking. I just wanted to come on here and talk about records. I'm gonna be on for the rest of the week every day. I'm planning on doing a different thing. So if you like what you're seeing, tune in, and if you can, join the conversation if you get the chance. If you're watching this, you can find it archived on my Facebook, Mike Manser, or my YouTube at Manser Faust Productions. Pretty soon, the audio of this and yesterday's recording will be up on the Night Cult Anchor profile, which will be distributed to Stitcher and Spotify and Apple Podcasts, all the big ones. And if you want to, you can go back and listen to the 13 episodes of Night Cult and a couple of the side episodes, and enjoy them. There's some really great conversations me and Chris would have about movies and music and all types of art. And we're doing the format a little bit differently. We're going to do a lot of different types of stuff. And once Chris gets in, I really want to do like a live show where we just take messages and calls and stuff, and sort of like this, but a lot more interactive. And we just kind of bullshit for a couple of hours. And while I'm promoting myself, I might as well promote a couple of other creators on these formats that I respect. First of all, Malcolm Tent Talks Tunes later tonight. I don't know what he's talking about yet, but get in there and get involved. Here's about some awesome music, because every week he pretty much kills it in the subjects, and he's got so much knowledge on everything. He's been in it longer than I've been alive. And he knows his shit. There's so many times back in the day I would buy records from him, and one of my greatest images is him like just reading this kid the riot act about how to tell the difference between Columbia pressings, the 6 eyes, and all that kind of stuff. He knows his shit a lot more than I fucking ever will claim to. And he shows off some really good records. You get some really good stories behind them, and you get like really great personalities in the chat. It's just a very great community it has going on there. So if you see this and you want more content like this, go to Malcolm Tent on YouTube or on Facebook. Tonight, I think it's around like 7 or 8 he does it. And check out Tent Talks Tunes and tell him Manser sent you. And also, if you get the chance, on Twitch, before I came on here, my buddy of mine named Gore, who's up in Maine doing a cannabis cultivating business. I don't have information on that yet, but he has a Twitch channel. He's been doing it a couple of days, just like me, where he talks about socialist, political issues and stuff like that, and talks about the probably a little bit of like the marijuana cultivation industry. And he's this morning he was slicing up some nuggets, and so there's that entertainment in it as well. So yeah, definitely support him. Plush Bunny Gore, all one word, on Twitch. Once again, tell him Manser sent you, and try to get a few people over here for the next stream. If you want to find me on Instagram, I will put that somewhere soon, or Night Cult Podcast on Instagram, all one word. That's where I'm going to be posting a lot of this stuff. I have a personal Instagram, but certain reasons I don't want to give out to the entire world. So yeah, you can find me there. You can find me on Spotify, and if you can, my co-host Chris Blush has a Depop, and he's on Instagram as Chris Blush. Go support him. He does amazing embroidery work. He did this vest. These nice little stitching jobs. Dude's killing it, and he makes some of the best stuff out there. And obviously, last but not least, Dave has not been as deeply involved in Crunch House as usual. He's more giving it over to a couple of other people. I think he's been spending most of his time up in Mass or New Hampshire. I can't remember. But if you're in this area, keep your eyes open for stuff coming up at Crunch House in West Haven. If anybody needs address or any kind of information on that, you can get at me through the DMs, and I will be willing to help you out. And come out and see some good shows. And without going into too much, you might see me do a safe word performance there quite soon. And just a little bit of there's nothing out about this yet, but if you're near, if you can make it out to Beer Axe, this nice brewery in East Haven, kind of in the middle of nowhere, so I would suggest driving there. November 27th, I will be performing. There will be a safe word set. And I'm pretty sure it's a lot of other different types of music. It's a mixed bill of a bunch of different stuff. So when that information becomes more readily available, and there's a flyer and all that good stuff, I will let you all know on one of these streams. So I just hit the 2-hour mark, which means it's a good time to fuck off. So I thank you, everybody who watches this after, and even the couple of people who tuned in while I was filming this. I thank you. Again, let everybody know when this is happening. I'm going to post, like little promos and stuff on, Facebook and YouTube when I get the chance. And just let the word out. And if you like what I'm talking about, like and subscribe, do the thing, hit the bell, blah, 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 and come out and have a good time. Learn about some music you might not know about, and some movies you might not know about. And just hear some fat bearded guy in his 30s drone on about popular culture that he finds interesting. So, yeah. I'm Mike Manser, and, this is Vinyl Fallout. Go listen to some fucking records. Peace. I still have to learn how to end stream. Thank you all. Goodbye.